dignitaries on the dais, off dais, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Actually, a lot has been said about the public sector enterprises, about practically every facet of it. So I'll try to focus more on the theme of the morning session here, that is about the inclusive growth, contribution of the PSUs to inclusive growth. You know, our country basically is faced with a number of challenges which are no doubt common to many of the developing nations. And they include education, health, practically every parameter. There is a challenge when even agriculture, and you know, the solutions are very complex in many cases. But if we see since independence, public sector enterprises in these facets have played a good moderating role for the inclusive growth in the society. There are direct contributions and there are indirect contributions. Direct contributions, like for example in the agriculture sector, right from the beginning, when it came to fertilizers, it came to machinery for agriculture, it was the public sector enterprises. Some of them are almost near extinction right now, like the Hindustan Machine Tools. But they played a big role in their times when the country had just become independent, and that's how the whole process started. Similarly, for example, water management. There are a number of public sector enterprises who play a big role. I'm not talking only about the CPSEs, but even like Sardar Sarovar Narmada Nigam Limited, the way they have managed the water in the states of Gujarat and Rajasthan for ensuring water supplied to those areas where it wasn't there, it's really commendable. In health services, so many public sector enterprises are into it, and a few names could be even organizations like Alimco, Hindustan Latex, etc. Education sector. Energy sector, of course, there are stalwarts from the energy sector over here. The way the coal PSUs, the oil PSUs have played a big role in the country. And communications like BSNL, MTNL, VSNL, there was a time when post-independence, there were some, all the communication network was under private control, and in some places like Calcutta, for example, the manual exchanges continued for a long time, and there were no sort of changes in terms of automation and all that. And it was at that point government was forced to take over all those private companies and establish its own government establishment for the countrywide communication network. And these were the needs of the hour. So all these may be in sort of a different phase in their sunset right now. But the fact is that at their time they have played a big role. Similarly, in the transport sector, who can match DMRC, for example, here? One of the best and the most efficiently run railway metro network in the world, could be the DMRC. It's a good benchmark for many other countries. Now, these are the direct contributions. Now, the indirect contributions. All of us are aware that most of these public sector enterprises in the 50s, they were established in remote areas, like, for example, Bukharo and all these major steel plants. Nothing was there except for land, and even the agricultural land was not sustaining the populations over there. It resulted in employment generation in those areas, establishment of ancillary units, schools for their own employees, and that's how even the schools provided service to the local population in those areas. Similarly, later on, the colleges, then hospitals in remote and inaccessible areas. That is how these big giants, which were established as PSUs contributed towards inclusive growth, transport, communication network. Whenever there is a big company opening an establishment in a remote area, communication has to follow, and that benefits the local people also. And then when, such a big establishment is in a remote area, there are a lot of small jobs which come into play there. I mean, there are so many, small establishments which automatically sprout up apart from the ancillary units. Now, coming to the indirect contribution towards inclusive growth. Direct contribution, yes, there have been many. For example, as mentioned by Mr. Chaubey also, that PSUs contribute 220,000 crores towards taxes and dividends annually. Now, this is such a large number. Out of this, the government spends money for governance in all the remote and inaccessible areas, subsidizing the have-nots, contributing towards education, health, agriculture, all these sectors. So the role of PSUs here is immense. Of course, there is a challenge. The challenge is the perception. And of course, as mentioned earlier by my other fellow panelists here, the challenge is that times are changing, and the PSUs need to be allowed to be freer in many ways. Yes, I agree. We have formed, organization. We have mini Ratnas, we have Maharatnas, Navratnas. Yes, true. But there are challenges in that as well, because as pointed out by Mr. Chaubey, the status of a PSU is like Draupadi. He mentioned so many husbands. Yes, that is a big challenge, which the private sector is free from. There are, it's like tying one hand of a person and one leg and asking him to run a race with the private sector. That is a big challenge. But of course, in everything there is a cycle. PSUs in any country, they start well, and when the competition starts heating up, when there is more business, then the private enterprises come over there. And at some point they wonder what these public sector enterprises are doing. They are not so efficient. I am reminded of this conversation with one of my friends. He was in tears. He told me, my son tells me, although he had done very well in his entire career, he says, my son tells me, you guys, you have wasted your life. You see, in 5 years, my salary is this much. I earn in a year as much as you earned all your life. So you have wasted your life. True, that might be a fact, but the fact remains that the father provided the base to the son. Without the type of education he imparted to the son and all that he had at his disposal, the son would not have really taken off from where he would have, where he did. So that people, the private enterprise should understand that when they say that their vehicle runs the most efficient way, they also should look at the fact who created the road in the first place and how good the road is. So these things need to be deliberated upon. Coming to the challenges PSUs are faced with, I'll talk about my organization. Yes, government started this organization in '78, and the investment from the government side was just 30 lakh rupees. And over these years, we have paid a dividend of 180 crores. It is a mini Ratna, fine. But the challenge comes when we want to scale up. We want to increase our turnover. You need investment. You cannot increase business without investment. All of us know. For that, yes, a mini Ratna, you can form some, joint ventures, but there's a limit. Again, it has to go to the cabinet. When there is an opportunity, and if you go to the cabinet every time, all of us know it's a wastage of time. You'll be spending a year by the time the cabinet approves, and the whole thing is over. sometimes it so happens that it goes to the cabinet, and by the time it's approved, the opportunity is over. So, I mean, for that, the solutions are there, like the Chinese model I keep advocating. The Chinese people, they have a holding company which takes all decisions about investments. They feel that somebody should go to X country, Y country. So the investment comes from the pool. Because if there is an oil PSU which is quite rich, and there is a telecom PSU which is not so, so they can pool in that money, and overall the country benefits. That is what is done in China, and there is no reason why we should not follow this model in India as well. These are some of the challenges. I think the time is over, I can see that. But, you know, there are some other challenges like, you know, this additional secretary from MSME, Mr. Tripathi, we have directions that we should buy bulk of the things from them, from the MSME segment. It's really wonderful, good to do that. But when you are in a competitive environment and you sort of float a tender, you give a preference to MSME, he does not, he's not obliged to give you EMD or PBG. So what happens? He might chicken out any time he feels the heat. And you are in a mess when you bid in the international market. So these things need to be deliberated. Maybe during the course of the day, some of these issues would be taken up. Thank you very much.